What you're about to listen to is audio of a phone conversation between me, Grayzone contributor Alex Rubenstein, and Leslie Aun, who happens to be the vice president in charge of communications for the National Endowment for Democracy. That's the regime change arm of US government. Leslie initiated this phone call because she and her organization were upset, apparently, by Alex's characterization in a Grayzone article of the NED as a CIA cutout. So, over the course of a 40-minute conversation, Alex and I provided Leslie with a fairly detailed history of the NED doing just that, doing what the CIA used to do covertly in overt fashion, sponsored by the US government, toppling designated enemies and working with violent and anti-democratic actors. And then we asked her some follow-up questions about the NED's current status and whether they have any provisions in place that prevent them from working with US intelligence. For the next month, Leslie sent emails promising us answers to these questions. Ultimately, she delivered nothing and went cold. So we decided to publish the audio of our conversation with the VP in charge of communications of the NED. We've shortened this conversation, but it's completely in context. So take a listen.
Hello?
Hey, Leslie.
Hi, who's this?
This is Alex Rubenstein and my editor, Max Blumenthal.
I know Alex was curious to know what you were interested in discussing.
Yes. Thank you so much. So we're just, there's been several columns where there seems to be the implication that National Endowment for Democracy is somehow linked to the CIA or part of the CIA, or I forget what the exact language was. It was like a cutout of the CIA. I'm not really even sure what that means. And I just wanted to reach out and ask you where you guys are getting that, because we're not part of the CIA.
We haven't said that you are a part of the CIA. The term cutout refers to specific remarks that have come from two of your founders, one being Alan Weinstein and the other being Carl Gershman, saying that it would be terrible for democratic groups around the world to be seen as subsidized by the CIA. We saw that in the 60s, and that's why it's been discontinued. We have not had the capability of doing this, and that's why the endowment was created. Similar quotes from Alan Weinstein, who said, a lot of what we do today was done covertly 25 years ago by the CIA.
Well, the National Endowment for Democracy was founded under the initiative of CIA Director William Casey. He wrote a letter to Reagan's Attorney General Ed Meese on a small working group to make recommendations to the president on the merits of creating a national endowment in support of free institutions throughout the world. And the NED came to being through a compromise between Bill Casey and Bill Proxmire, who was a senator from Wisconsin. I'm not sure if you know about this, but Proxmire had insisted that the NED be completely firewalled from the CIA. And ultimately, the CIA director, Casey, got Proxmire to compromise and reach an understanding that the Senate would essentially approve any U.S. intelligence involvement with the NED. And, at the time, the NED was sponsoring the American Institute for Free Labor Development, which was absolutely a CIA proxy operating under the auspices of the AFL-CIO. And they helped elect a right-wing military thug in Panama. His name was Nicolas Barletta. He's one of many figures that the NED has helped to bring to power by sponsoring groups that were seeking to overthrow governments the same way that the CIA had done covertly. I can give you many examples if you wish.
I mean, I'd love to have all that history and all that background. I mean, that's not how I understand our history to be, and maybe you know more than I do. But that is, Ned is very much not a part of the CIA, not affiliated with the CIA. We don't go out and unseat presidential candidates or those sorts of things. I mean, that's not our role. That's not our purpose. So I'm aware of those old quotes. They're very convoluted and they weren't elegantly spoken, and they actually have sort of been around and sort of haunted us for a long time, and it's unfortunate. I think if you read between the lines, what they're saying is the CIA used to fund pro-democratic activities, and that we had a specific, that Ned was going to be separate and different and independent, and we are independent. But I'm really curious to know all the rest of this stuff, because I frankly didn't know it. Like, where would I find this information?
I'm surprised that you don't know it if you're working for an organization. I mean, you should know, and the NED is proud of the fact that it spent nearly $1 million or maybe more to unseat Daniel Ortega and the Sandinistas in the 1990 election in Nicaragua and install a neoliberal, Violeta Chamorro. The National Endowment for Democracy proceeded to sponsor, to the tune of over $1 million, NGOs and media organizations in Nicaragua that fueled a violent insurrection in 2018 that has left over 200 people dead, including many Sandinistas I interviewed as a journalist. The NED sponsored the career of Juan Guaido, who has led a military coup against the Venezuelan elected leadership in 2019. The NED also sponsored, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, the party of Leopoldo Lopez, who is Guaido's mentor, Lopez being the de facto leader of Venezuela's insurrectionist opposition, who led a military coup in 2002. After forcing Chavez, the elected leader, out of office, Lopez stood at his desk. This event was endorsed by the International Republican Institute's director at the time, who is a subsidiary of the National Endowment for Democracy. We've seen NED-sponsored groups invade Hong Kong's parliament and attack the parliament in the same way that January 6 rioters did. We've also heard that from Karl Gershman himself, calling for regime change in Russia at this time that the NED was sponsoring groups that were involved in the overthrow, the violent overthrow of Ukraine's elected president, Viktor Yanukovych. So I don't know how you are unaware of any of this activity or deny its existence. It's all a matter of public record. And this also happens to dovetail with the CIA's agenda of ever since its existence.
Well, I can assure you that we're not part of the CIA. So
how can you assure me, Leslie?
So
Leslie, what assurance can you provide us? What assurance can you provide us that U.S. intelligence has no involvement and does not collaborate with the NED? Are there anything concrete you can point us to?
How do you disprove something? That's sort of like a negative thing. Do you have any evidence that we are colluding with the CIA? Because I got to tell you, I'm on the leadership team. I report to the CEO, and we have lots of meetings all the time, and there's been no one in the CIA in the office. So I'm not even like joking. Like I would not work, I definitely am not part of the CIA. I'll just lay that out on you.
Right. Well, I understand the forward-facing presentation of the NED, and I've been to some of your events, spoken to your people and your grantees, but I asked you what concrete measures the NED has put into place to firewall it from U.S. intelligence. And also I was wondering if you have any provisions that forbid grants to supporters of violence. First, maybe we can cover what concrete measures the NED has in place to prevent collaboration with U.S. intelligence.
I mean, it's a really good question.
Do you have an answer?
I don't know if it's in the statute. I don't know if it's, I don't know. I'm going to sound like an idiot. I don't mean to sound like an idiot. I don't know if there's anything specific in the statute. So I should ask, and I will ask if there is. But in general, that's not what we do. We do not work with the CIA.
Okay. And you're welcome to provide me in a follow-up and Alex with anything about any concrete provisions that formally restrict the NED from working in any fashion with U.S. intelligence or enabling U.S. intelligence to shape its agenda. To the issue of violence, I pointed you to Leopoldo Lopez, Juan Guaido, and the Venezuelan opposition, which participated in violent Guarimba riots, which left dozens and dozens dead. These figures attacked the Ministry of Justice in Caracas, had the building set aflame. And we can also point to Felix Maradiaga, whose IEEP in Managua, Nicaragua, received hundreds of thousands of dollars of grants from the NED. Maradiaga was filmed inside UNAM, a Nicaraguan university, alongside armed gunmen and thugs associated with criminal gangs as they took over a university and then began to attack the Nicaraguan police. These riots in 2018 between April and July, which I personally covered, I interviewed victims of the violence there, left over 200 dead on both sides, including 18 police officers. Then we have Bellingcat, which receives hundreds of thousands of dollars from the NED. This is a media organization based in the US and UK. And its Russia director, Christo Grozev, as Alex recently reported, went on Sky News to justify the terrorist bombing of a cafe in St. Petersburg targeting a Russian war journalist, Vladimir Tatarsky. He said that this attack, that Tatarsky was a legitimate target. That's his precise words. And he disputed the idea that the cafe was a civilian target, even though it clearly was. And I just wonder how any of this fits with the NED's mission of supporting peaceful transition when these people are on the record and in the streets participating in violence and justifying it in media.
I mean, we do not support or condone violence. Absolutely not. People have beliefs, and we're just as you do. We support independent media. Sometimes those media have different beliefs. They may say things that are different from what we say. We are not there to censor them, but we do not, as an institution, condone or support violence. I'm not going to pretend that I know the ins and outs of every single one of these scenarios that you have laid forward for me. I'm not a country expert in those places, but I will tell you that NED is not part of the CIA, and we don't support or condone violence. And it's hard for me to think of how I will go back and look at the statute that created us. I'm not sure if there's any specific, I just know how we work and what we do and who I work with every day, and there's no CIA agents around the office. But I will absolutely go and check and see some of the things that you brought up.
We definitely appreciate that, and we don't appreciate that the CIA might deceive well-meaning person like yourself by operating undercover as they so often do. But Alex, you had something you wanted to say.
Are there any NED policies to cut off funds from any activists or activist groups that are engaged in violence or journalists that are advocating violence or justifying violence?
Do we have a policy to cut off funding for organizations engaging or calling for violence? Was that the question?
Or advocating, justifying, yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to find out if we have a specific policy. I know we have a practice, but let me find out if there's actual, as a matter of policy. I don't know specifically the answer to that, but I think it's a good question, and I will ask it, and I will find out.
Okay. I'd also personally love a list of organizations that have had their funds cut off because of their engagement in violent activity or their association with it.
I don't know if we have, stopped granting money to an organization because of what you've described. I don't know the answer to that, so I will find out.
Karl Gershman told Russian pranksters that he was working closely, for example, with the Belarusian opposition figure Svetlana Tikhonovskaya and her team very, very closely, and they attempted to topple the government. In a conference alongside the USAID's then director, Mark Green, who was a director under Trump, he called for new and creative actions to hold regimes accountable and then to mobilize support and support the people inside these countries, because that's where the liberation is going to come from. So essentially, street mobilizations to topple governments. When we've seen the NED sponsor groups that toppled elected governments or sought to topple elected governments. And I would point to the Maidan events in 2013, 2014 as a perfect example of that. So how is it pro-democracy to support mobilizations that seek to remove elected leaders?
Isn't that sort of what democracy is?
Like on January 6th.
I was a government major 30 years ago, but it does I do believe that the people demand change in their government. That's sort of the isn't that democracy? That's kind of the definition of it?
Through elections?
When you overthrow a government, an elected government by violent means, that's called a coup d'etat.
Okay. Well, I wasn't. We are about elections, fair and free elections. We are not about violence.
How do you ensure that their views are majoritarian? If it's a minority of people who you're supporting seeking to bring about a new government, is there any kind of polling that's done to confirm that their views are majoritarian?
We don't. That's not really what democracy is about, is it? Only the majoritarian folks get to talk?
Yeah, I think what Alex is asking is if you have any criteria for funding groups that participate in violent coups, or this is a question we keep coming back to, street mobilizations that aim
And
to
I just
topple
told you
elected
that,
leaders.
I mean, if someone came to us with a proposal and said, "Hi, we're the violent coup people. We'd like you to give us some money so we can do one of them." No, that's not what we would do.
Right.
That's
They
not
never,
how we operate.
They never do that. Like Felix Maradiaga in Nicaragua said he was there to advance democracy and all the boilerplate, and then when the violence hit, he was at the forefront. He was deeply involved in it. He was arrested, put on trial and arrested, and in a deal, he was let go and welcomed by Secretary of State Tony Blinken. And so it sends the message to other countries, according to them, that the U.S. isn't really serious when it talks about foreign meddling or when it condemns the events on January 6th.
Yeah, I'm just curious. So my understanding that you're supporters of. I'm just curious. Are you supporters of the Belarusian government, of Ortega government, of the Chinese government? I mean, those are all governments that you are you're supportive of, like from an editorial perspective?
Well, it's interesting that you're putting it in this kind of black and white framework. If you
That's
want,
what you did to me.
Well, you work for a U.S. government organization.
And providing coverage that most outlets refuse to do, factual coverage, actually provides a more nuanced understanding to geopolitics.
Yeah, and I mean, the Washington Post used to cover...
You are so entitled to your view, right? Like, it might be the minority view, but that's democracy in America, right? You get to have that view. Now, I can call you up and I can say, "Hey, guys, I don't think you're characterizing our organization correctly. I'm here to tell you that Ned is not part of the CIA. We're not taking directives from the CIA. We're not knowingly supporting violence to organizations or advocating violence organizations. More than 50% of our grants actually go to independent media."
Well, then they're not independent. They're not independent if they're taking grants from the U.S. government, are they?
Independent media, that typically means that they are media that is not being independently from editorially. I mean, that's my understanding of independent media. Do you have a different understanding of it?
I would think that media would be influenced if it were taking substantially state money.
Look, guys, I want to give you answers to your questions. I'm reaching out to you. I'm telling you from good faith that I'm trying to say, you know what, we're not part of the CIA. I'd appreciate it if you sort of quit making that accusation. I certainly will follow up with the questions you're asking are good ones. And
all right, well, let's drill down that question, Leslie. Let's just try to resolve that, because you said that you weren't familiar with the term cutout. So it would be an organization spun out as an initiative of that entity, and which performs the work or advances the agenda of that entity. We put forward our view of the term cutout and how it's used in Alex's article, so you can feel free to follow up with us on that. And I also said, feel free to propose your preferred language, since you seem quite offended
which
by
isn't part of the CIA.
Ned. So we should say Ned, which is not part of the CIA.
Oh my gosh.
We can add, a statement by you if you'd like. We'd love to quote you.
Saying what?
Well, you initiated the call with us over some objection.
I did, and I really, yes, and I appreciate you taking the call, by the way, because a lot of organizations wouldn't, a lot of journalists wouldn't, so I really genuinely appreciate that. I mean, I'm happy to try to answer some of these other questions. I'm actually curious to know the answers.
All right, well, I've asked 3 times now, and you can feel free to follow up. What provisions are in place?
Yeah, I've written it down. You don't have to. Okay. You don't have to replace.
All right, so that's kind of where, and then we would quote that. We would be happy to cite that.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I have to find that answer, so I will definitely do that.